You told yourself it was over. You swore this time was the last. But days passed, and something pulled you back. Not boredom, not weakness. Something deeper, something you can't name. A craving that doesn't want pleasure. It wants to escape from shame, from silence, from yourself. This isn't about the drug. It's about what the drug silences. That's why you keep relapsing. That's why even sobriety feels hollow. In this video, we go beyond advice, beyond motivation. This is a descent into the root. You'll discover the exact psychological map that Carl Jung left for those in silent despair. Shadow work, dopamine traps, identity collapse, the hunger behind the habit. This isn't just about getting clean. It's about becoming whole. You'll learn why your shadow sabotages progress, how to break the emotional loop behind every relapse, and how to rebuild a life that no longer craves escape. This is your full recovery map. 6 stages, 1 transformation. Stay with me, because what's waiting at the end of this path is you. "3:17 a.m. Phone light pulses like a heartbeat against your cheek. Outside, the city sleeps, but inside your skull, fireworks of restless need. You promised you'd close the app an hour ago. Yet here you are, scrolling, refreshing, chasing one more spark of novelty to drown the static in your chest. This isn't pleasure. It's pain trying on a prettier name. Carl Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Tonight, fate looks like pixels. Tomorrow, it could wear the scent of whiskey, the applause of strangers, or the heat of a stranger's bed. Different masks, same puppeteer. Stay with me for the next few minutes. Let's catch that puppeteer in the act. Shadow craving is a hunger born from exile. Not exile from society, exile from your own abandoned rooms. When you were small, you learned to hide pieces of yourself. The anger that flared when promises broke, the tears that embarrassed the adults, the wild dream they laughed off at dinner. You locked those fragments in the basement of the psyche and threw blankets of achievement and politeness over the door. But what is buried alive does not die. It whispers through the floorboards. When the whisper grows too loud, the mind invents a craving to muffle the sound. So the bottle isn't the problem. The late-night shopping cart isn't the problem. The inbox you check every 3 minutes isn't the problem. The problem is the child in the basement banging on the pipes, begging to be named. Why can't willpower fix this? Because willpower is upstairs, and the code runs downstairs. Each craving trip wires the nucleus accumbens, flooding it with dopamine, a biochemical promise note. The pleasure is anticipation, not consumption, which is why satisfaction feels like sandcastles in the tide, and the hunt resets stronger than before. Picture Daniel, 34, freshly promoted. On paper, he's thriving. On weekends, he disappears, lost in 12-hour gaming marathons no one sees. Underneath the pixels lives a 7-year-old who learned that winning was the only way to make a volatile father smile. The game isn't his escape from life. It's a time machine chasing unfed approval. Every unhealed memory writes a line of survival code. When loneliness spikes, seek company of glass or screen. When shame rises, run until your lungs burn. When boredom creeps, Feed it sugar, gossip, anything. The loop fires faster than thought. By the time the thinking brain says stop, the body is already halfway through the ritual, hands moving like it's destiny. So the real question isn't, how do I resist? It's, what is this loop protecting me from feeling? And am I brave enough to feel it now? 5 modern disguises. 1. Ambition addiction. You announce that you love the grind. Truth, you fear the silence that appears when you stop. You worship future promotions to outrun present emptiness. 2. Achievement scrolling. Endless feeds of someone else's wins. Dopamine drips on your dormant dreams until comparison becomes self-harm, dressed as research. 3. Microwave intimacy. Swipe, match, ghost, repeat. Connection compressed into quick hits, so you never risk the slow terror of being truly seen. 4. Self-improvement binge. You inhale podcasts and highlight books, collecting insights you never let touch the soil of action. It feels like progress. It's shiny procrastination. 5. Niceness narcotic. You smile until your jaw aches. Say yes until your calendar bleeds. You trade authenticity for approval and wonder why resentment tastes sweet at first, then sour. Different costumes, one director. Avoidance of the old ache. Or as Jung might put it, these acts are not life. They are cover songs for silence. Listen to the craving. Listen closely. Behind every urge lives a question. Will you meet the part of me no one met? The bottle asks it. So does the feed, the gym, the praise. The craving isn't enemy, it's envoy. Kill the envoy, and the message finds darker routes. Welcome the envoy, and the message turns into guidance. You are not weak, you are wounded, and wounds speak in cravings until they are heard. Before we breathe, 3 compass points for the road back. First, name the pattern aloud. Sound turns fog into shape. Second, witness the emotion beneath the urge without editing. Emotion is a visitor. Open the door. It leaves through the door. Third, give the shadow a task it can complete without harm. Turn pain into art, anger into boundary, restlessness into movement. When the shadow is employed, it stops rioting for attention. Let's try a small ritual together. Close your eyes. Inhale for 4. Hold for 2. Exhale for 6. Ask yourself, where does my craving visit most? What emotion walks in right before it? What memory painted that emotion's first face? If an answer whispers, write it down. A truth written is a truth disarmed. Share one insight in the comments. Your courage could become someone else's mirror. One more truth before we descend. Healing isn't a Hollywood montage. It's rainy Tuesdays, cravings whispering, and you choosing again to sit in a storm without building an arc of distraction. Every small refusal rewrites the survival code. Every conscious breath plants a flag in the unconscious. Facing the craving is only the threshold. When you step through, the ground gives way, because before you rise, you must descend. The descent is Jung's second stage of healing, the abyss, where shadows show their full shape. In our next episode, Descent into the Abyss, Carl Jung's second stage of addiction recovery, we'll explore what happens when the shadow stops knocking and starts pulling you below the floorboards. Subscribe, ring the bell, and pack a flashlight. We're going under, because that's where the lost parts wait to be reclaimed. If tonight's reflection opened a door, don't close it. Watch part 2, or send this video to someone whose craving carries your name. Because somewhere, someone you'll never meet is waiting for a stranger's courage to make their own first crack in the wall. You don't descend because you're weak. You descend because every addiction recovery trick finally failed. The bottle is empty. The feed is dry. 3:17 a.m. Phone glow feels radioactive on your face, but the ache in your chest only grows. Why does relief vanish the moment you need it most? Stay, because in 40 seconds you'll know. Carl Jung called this silent hour the threshold of transformation. It's not when we rise, it's when we fall into the pain we've buried. This isn't collapse, it's initiation, your first step into shadow work, the unseen psychology of addiction. Scientists say over 90% of relapse happens in this exact neurochemical lull. Jung says the craving here is not for pleasure, but for truth. So tonight we descend into the abyss within to meet the shadow that's been steering every craving and to learn why facing it is the only way through. Descent isn't failure. It's the moment your psyche stops pretending, when the truth inside you demands to be seen. Carl Jung believed transformation doesn't begin in the light. It begins in the fall. Not the kind that breaks you, but the kind that strips you bare. The descent into the unconscious isn't chaos. It's a return to everything you left behind. Memories you pushed down, feelings you weren't allowed to feel, beliefs that were never really yours. All of them exiled into your unconscious. And the craving? It isn't just for relief. It's for reunion. Reunion with the parts of you buried in the dark. Addiction in this stage becomes a map, not to escape, but to understand. Each craving is a clue, guiding you to the source of your pain. For example, the bottle you reach for might actually be pointing to an old grief, and the endless scrolling could be a sign of unspoken loneliness. Jung called it shadow work. The moment your pain stops hiding behind behavior and begins to speak through it. This is the descent, not into darkness, but into the truth you've been avoiding. Yet what truth waits in that abyss? The abyss isn't hell, it's memory. Not the kind you recall, but the kind your soul never forgot. The abyss is made of every suppressed emotion, every time you had to be strong when you weren't, every truth you silenced just to belong. It isn't evil, it's honest. And that honesty is what makes it unbearable, because to descend is to face what you've organized your entire life to avoid: shame, grief, loneliness that felt like extinction. Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. That's the paradox. You think the abyss will destroy you, but what actually destroys you is avoiding it, because suppressed pain doesn't disappear. It disguises itself as addiction, as perfection, as the persona you think you need to be. The abyss isn't punishment, it's an invitation. So why do we run from it? Because we're afraid of what we'll find in the dark. If something in you stirred while listening, trust it. These aren't just ideas. They're fragments of a truth you've always carried. Subscribe to Deeper Rewind for more unspoken insights. The kind that don't just explain, but remember you. This is where addiction intensifies. The faster you run from your shadow, the larger it looms behind you. Not because you're chasing pleasure, but because you're running from pain. The drink, the endless scrolling, the overworking, the person you can't stop fixing. All of it becomes a ritual designed not to soothe you, but to keep you away from the abyss. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." In other words, if you ignore your wounds, they'll quietly shape every choice you make. You're not broken. You're coping. It was how you survived. But the thing about coping, it keeps the pain close enough to live with, but never close enough to heal. So you stay trapped in a loop, reaching, escaping, numbing, repeating. And the longer you avoid the descent, the more the craving grows. Not because it's hungry, but because you've forgotten how to feel. But even numbness has its limits. There's always a moment when the coping stops working. You take the drink, and it doesn't numb you. You scroll for hours and still feel hollow. You chase one more achievement, but the emptiness still finds you. You smile through the pain, and the mask finally slips. This is the flashpoint, the moment of truth, when there's nowhere left to hide. The breaking doesn't happen loudly. It happens in silence, in that lonely hour, when the world is quiet and nothing can distract you anymore. Perhaps it's 3 a.m., and you're alone with only your thoughts. You realize the craving wasn't for pleasure. It was for presence, not with others, with yourself. The descent becomes conscious here. It's no longer something happening to you. It's something calling you to stop running and to begin remembering. At this crossroads, a choice emerges. Continue to run, or turn and face what hurts. Carl Jung didn't ask people to fix themselves. He asked them to face themselves, to turn toward the pain instead of away from it. The descent, he said, is sacred because it's where truth lives, not the truth you tell others, but the one your unconscious never stopped carrying. This is the beginning of shadow work, the slow reunion with the self you cast aside. Jung believed that integrating this shadow is how we become whole, where you stop asking, "How do I make this go away?" and start asking, "What is this trying to show me?" The craving, the silence, the emotional collapse, all of it becomes language, the psyche speaking in metaphor. Suddenly you understand. Your pain was never the enemy. It was a messenger. And you realize you don't heal by defeating your darkness, but by befriending it. You are not asked to fight the abyss. You are asked to enter it with awareness, with open eyes and a willing heart. Because only when the wound is witnessed can it begin to transform. And only when the shadow is honored does it stop controlling you from the dark, allowing you to become whole again. The descent doesn't destroy you. It dismantles the illusion that you were ever fine. When you stop running and finally sit with the pain, you begin to hear it, not as punishment, but as memory. This is the second stage of addiction recovery, the most avoided and the most essential. Because without this descent, no real healing can begin. But something happens when you descend far enough. The mask begins to crack. Through those cracks, for the first time, you catch a glimpse of the authentic self beneath. If you've come this far, you're already braver than you know. In the next video, Stage 3, the persona breaks. We'll explore what happens when the identity you built to survive no longer fits the true self trying to emerge. That's when recovery gets personal. That's when it gets real. And remember, the cracks are how the light gets in. Morning rush hour. Crowds blur past mirrored glass. You catch a flash of your reflection, but the person staring back feels counterfeit. Lips curved just right, eyes rehearsed, clothes calibrated for approval. Then, for half a heartbeat, the mask slips. A spasm in the smile, a flicker of panic, and you see it, the fracture you've hidden for years. Addiction recovery doesn't begin with quitting. It begins when your identity starts to collapse. Carl Jung called it the breaking of the persona, the moment your mask no longer works, and the shadow starts to rise. But what if the life you've built, your choices, your personality, your relationships, were all shaped by suppressed emotions? What if the person they loved was never really you? This isn't just about cravings. It's about confronting the unconscious mind and what it's been hiding beneath the performance. In Stage 3 of the Shadow Craving, we explore the psychology of addiction, identity collapse, and the pain of becoming real. Keep your eyes on the mirror, because what blinks next will rewrite everything you call you. The persona isn't who you are. It's who you learn to be. Carl Jung described the persona as the mask we wear, not to deceive, but to survive. It's the role that earns approval, the face that keeps us safe. Over time, that role becomes automatic. You become the achiever, the caretaker, the strong one, the one who doesn't need help. But here's the truth. The persona is adaptation, not identity. And in the process of building it, you bury the parts of you that felt inconvenient, emotional, or unlovable. In the psychology of addiction, this split becomes dangerous because the more you hide the shadow, the more your unconscious mind tries to reveal it through craving, collapse, and emotional sabotage. And that's when the mask begins to crack. If this moment speaks to something you've felt, leave a trace in the comments, a sentence, a thought, a memory. Someone else might read your words and recognize themselves. And sometimes, that's how healing begins. Not alone, but in quiet connection. It doesn't shatter all at once. Sometimes, the mask breaks quietly. A pause too long in a conversation. A craving that hits when you thought you were healed. A sudden, unbearable silence in a room full of people. That's how the persona collapses. Not with drama, but with dissonance. You feel it when your behavior no longer matches your truth. When pretending becomes painful. When achievement no longer soothes you, and your smile feels like a costume. In recovery, this stage is often mistaken for relapse, but it's not failure. It's your unconscious mind rejecting the performance. You may feel lost, numb, angry, or untethered. These are the emotional triggers shadow work exposes, because when the mask cracks, the shadow speaks louder. And what it says is everything you've been afraid to feel. Collapse isn't the end, it's the passage. Carl Jung believed that true transformation begins when the false self disintegrates. This is the initiation no one prepares you for. When the mask dissolves, and what's left isn't clarity, but chaos. You don't know who you are. You only know you can't go back. This is where many people relapse, not because they're weak, but because they're untethered. Addiction becomes the rope that still feels familiar. But if you can stand in the uncertainty, if you can resist reaching for the old identity, something new begins. The shadow self isn't here to destroy you. It's here to integrate you, to show you the parts of yourself you've been conditioned to abandon. This collapse is a return. No one tells you that healing will feel like grief, not because you're broken, but because you're letting go of the person who kept you safe. You mourn the version of you that knew how to numb, the part of you that stayed quiet, smiled when it hurt, achieved when you were exhausted. This is the pain of becoming real, not because truth is cruel, but because the mask was comfortable. Addiction recovery isn't just about stopping. It's about releasing identities that never belonged to you. Carl Jung taught that this descent into the shadow is the only path to wholeness. But it's not clean. It's not proud. It's shaking hands, late-night tears, sitting in silence when all you want is a distraction. Because for the first time, you're not performing. You're listening. And underneath the ache, someone real is starting to speak. You don't need a 10-step plan. You need permission to not know who you are right now. When the persona collapses, there's a hunger to rebuild it fast, to fill the space, to be someone, to feel normal. Don't sit in the in-between. Shadow work isn't about becoming better. It's about becoming honest. Name what's coming up: anger, emptiness, panic, guilt. Write it down. Let it speak. Recovery means letting your nervous system unlearn urgency. Give yourself stillness. Walk, breathe, speak less, feel more. The craving may return, not for the substance, but for the mask. Resist the old roles. You don't have to rebuild who you were. You're not going back. You're moving through, and something far more true is waiting. The mask is gone. You're no longer pretending. But now, something deeper begins to emerge. From the unconscious rises the next test, not the role you played, but the force that shaped it. In Jung's language, it's called the archetype, a powerful pattern living in your psyche. The critic, the child, the savior, the addict. Each one carries a message and a warning. In stage 4, we face what lives behind the craving, the archetypal shadow that's been driving your choices. You've broken the mask. Now you meet the voice that wore it. Which hidden character inside you keeps relapsing the story? Carl Jung called it an addiction archetype, a timeless mask that whispers, "Just one more." Sometimes it's the wounded child begging for comfort. Sometimes the rebel lighting everything on fire. But every craving you've ever answered was an archetype directing the scene from the dark wings of your mind. Tonight, we drag that invisible actor into the spotlight. If you keep repeating the same loop, and you're finally ready to know who is pulling the strings, stay. Because the moment you name the pattern, the script begins to change. Recovery isn't just quitting the substance, it's rewriting the myth that drives you back to it. Jung called these myths archetypes, timeless characters living in the collective unconscious, shaping our choices, our cravings, our collapse. Maybe you felt it, that sudden shift in your own voice, the sentence that says, "I deserve this drink," or "Nothing matters, light the match." That voice isn't weakness, it's an ancient script. In this video, we'll expose 4 core addiction archetypes: the orphan, the victim, the rebel, and the addict itself, and show how each one hijacks the brain's dopamine loop. We'll move from raw story to concrete tools, shadow work, somatic release, active imagination. By the end, you'll know which archetype calls your name and how to answer without surrendering. Ready to meet the face behind the craving? Imagine the psyche as an ancient stage. Long before you took your first breath, the script was drafted. the actors waiting in the dark wings. Archetypes are those actors, universal patterns like the mother, the hero, and in addiction, the wounded child and the destroyer. They aren't memories. They're blueprints wired into the collective unconscious. When life triggers pain, an archetype steps forward, slips on your face, and begins to speak through impulses, daydreams, cravings, that late-night urge to disappear. The victim archetype begging for rescue. The sudden reckless, I don't care. The rebel archetype demanding scorched earth. Archetypes are not fantasies. They're psychological code. Decode the pattern, and the addiction script starts to glitch. Next, meet the 4 archetypes that secretly shape every relapse and every chance at freedom. 1. The orphan wounded child. A grown body, 7-year-old eyes. Loneliness tastes metallic. Approval is oxygen. When shame spikes, the orphan whispers, "Numb me." Inner child trauma drives late-night scrolling, comfort food, quick highs. 2. The victim a voice that begins every sentence with, "Why always me?" It feeds on injustice, turns pain into identity. When bills pile or lovers leave, the victim pouts, "I deserve relief." Victim mentality makes relapse feel righteous. 3. The rebel destroyer. Cigarette sparks in the dark. The world said, "Sit still." So the rebel lit the rulebook. It craves chaos. Speeding tickets, bar fights, ghosted therapists. Rebel archetype uses addiction as a middle finger to authority, then self-destructs. 4. The addict self, a hypnotist in your bloodstream. Smooth, persuasive. One more can't hurt. It records every dopamine spike, replays it as craving. This is the self-sabotage archetype, the looping ritual that keeps the other 3 alive. How to spot them? Language. I can't. I'm owed. Watch me burn. Just 1. Body cues. Tight chest for the orphan. Heavy sighs for the victim. Jaw clench for the rebel. Restless fingers for the addict. These archetypes aren't demons. They're survival code, written when you had no better tools. But code can be rewritten. Next, we'll see how these patterns hijack brain chemistry, turning myth into measurable compulsion. Archetypes feel mystical, yet their power is brutally chemical. A stress trigger fires. Lonely night, rejected text. The orphan flashes an old memory. Abandoned. In milliseconds, the limbic system floods cortisol. The brain pleads for balance, and the addict archetype answers with a dopamine promise note. Swipe the screen, pour the drink, light the spark. Dopamine spikes, cortisol dips, relief glows. Neural pathways record the shortcut. Trigger. Archetype voice, ritual, reward. Repeat it often enough, and the pathway becomes a freeway. Unconscious behavior you call fate. MRI studies show that craving lights the nucleus, accumbens brighter than the reward itself. Proof that it's the anticipation the archetype loves. Break the loop and the brain panics, not because it needs the substance, but because the archetype lost its microphone. Understanding this dopamine cycle turns mythic shadow into something you can map, measure, and soon rewrite. You can't kill an archetype, but you can face it. Find a quiet room. Close your eyes. Picture the moment before you reach for the ritual. Step 1. Name it. Which voice shows up first? The orphan's tremor. The rebel's laugh. Say its name out loud. Language pulls shadow into light. Step 2. Dialogue. Ask it, what are you protecting? Let words surface without censorship. This is active imagination, Jung's bridge between conscious and unconscious. Step 3. Negotiate. Offer the archetype a new task. Orphan, Write a letter to the 7-year-old you. Victim? List one choice you still control. Rebel? Channel the fire into sprinting, drumming, painting. Addict? Slow breath pattern. In 4. Hold 2, out 6. Step 4. Anchor in the body. Place your hand on the tightest muscle. Breathe until it softens. This somatic cue tells the limbic system, danger past. The archetype doesn't vanish, but it learns new lines, and you reclaim the stage. Integration means your shadow stops rioting for attention because it's finally on the team. Add these 3 practices to your daily recovery ritual. 1. Somatic release walk, 10 minutes. Focus on the jaw and hips, places the rebel and victim store tension. Each exhale, drop your shoulders and name the archetype under your breath. Rebel, rebel. Movement teaches the brain safety without substances. 2nd, parts work, journaling. Fold the page in half. Left column, the archetype's raw voice. Right column, your conscious reply. Each on 5 exchanges a day rewires the trigger ritual. Shortcut into trigger dialogue. 3rd, night bite visualization. 2 minutes before sleep. Picture the persona mask resting on a table. Thank it for protecting you. Then imagine it dissolving into soft light. Close with the line, I choose the truth, even when it aches. Consistency beats intensity. 10 quiet minutes daily will outperform 1 heroic marathon of willpower. Because integration isn't a single breakthrough. It's the 1,000 small choices that teach your nervous system a new story. The mask has cracked, the archetype is unmasked, and the stage lights dim. In the silence, you feel something pulsing beneath the rubble. The wound itself. That's where we go next. Stage 5. Integration of the wound dives into the grief, forgiveness, and unexpected power that live under the scar. We'll turn abandoned pain into living wisdom, so the craving no longer needs to speak for it. Subscribe, bring a pen, and prepare to meet the part of you that never stopped waiting. The descent is behind you. The stitching begins now. Have you ever felt an ache so old it wakes you at 2 a.m.? A hurt that drags you back to a drink, a screen, a secret, anything to quiet the pain. That ache is the hidden wound of addiction, not weakness, an unconscious trigger for relapse. Stress, craving, quick relief, shame, repeat. Psychologist Carl Jung said this unseen self rewinds the cycle until you finally listen. In this video, you'll learn real steps to find that wound, hear its message, and close it, so calm lasts longer than any craving. Stay, breathe, and see how healing begins with one honest look inside. You're not fighting alcohol or nicotine. You're fighting an old emotional wound your brain keeps trying to numb. Maybe it started with a slammed door, a laugh at your tears, a night you felt invisible. That memory sank into your nerves. Whenever life pokes the same spot, pain spikes, your body begs for quick dopamine, and the loop rolls on. Jung called this buried hurt a shadow wound, the part of you hidden to survive. Modern scans agree. Unhealed childhood trauma keeps the amygdala on high alert. The brain grabs fast comfort to hush the alarm. Healing begins when you name the pain instead of numbing it. Place a hand where it lives, throat, chest, gut. Inhale 4, hold 2, exhale 6. Feel the muscles soften. That single breath breaks the loop for a moment. Repeat. Moments link into minutes, then hours. This is the doorway to shadow healing. and to a life where you no longer crave pain just to feel safe. Pain isn't just a feeling, it's a chemical flare. Stress hits, your brain releases cortisol. Cortisol whispers, danger. To balance it, the brain searches for fast dopamine. That's the moment the craving shows up and offers a shortcut. You take the drink, click the app, light the spark. Dopamine spikes, cortisol drops, relief floods in. But it lasts seconds. Then shame rises, and the hidden wound throbs again. Cortisol climbs. The craving returns, round and round. The pain-craving loop. Think of it like a scratched record. Same groove, same song. Playing until the vinyl wears out. Willpower tries to lift the needle, but the groove pulls it back. Breaking the emotional cycle starts with recognizing this chemistry. The moment you name the pattern, pain, cortisol, craving, dopamine, you create a micro gap. In that gap, you can breathe, ground, and choose something new. Small gap today, larger gap tomorrow. Freedom, one loop at a time. Close your eyes and run a silent scan through your body. Start at the crown, slide down behind the eyes. Pause at the throat. Does it feel tight, like words you never spoke? Drift to the chest. Any dull ache? A pressure that rises when you feel judged. That can be the inner child, guarding old rejection. Move to the stomach. Is there a knot, hard, twisting? Whenever you fear abandonment? Many of us store addiction and childhood trauma right here. Wherever the tension flares, place a hand on it. Name what you feel: grief, anger, dread. That single word turns fog into shape. Now breathe. In 4. Hold 2. Out 6. Imagine warm light flowing from your palm into the knot, softening it by a single degree. This is shadow work for recovery. Simple, honest, somatic. You're not reliving the past. You're giving the wound oxygen so it can heal. Do this body scan once a day. Each time, you map the pain more clearly. And every map needs a destination. Next, we'll use Jung's method to guide that pain toward real repair. Carl Jung's biggest insight: pain is a message, not a mistake. Ignore the message, and it shouts through cravings. Listen, and it turns into guidance. Here's the map he left us. Step 1. Personify the pain. Give the tension a form. Maybe it's a small child, a tired warrior, a lonely wolf. This is active imagination, letting the wound speak in images your mind understands. Step 2. Start a dialogue. Ask, what are you protecting? Write the answer without judging it. The goal is shadow dialogue, not shadow demolition. Step 3. Offer a new job. Tell the image, when you feel unsafe, breathe with me instead of reaching for the bottle. Archetypes are like actors. They follow the script you hand them. Step 4. Seal with a body cue. Place your hand where the tension was. Breathe once, slow and full. This anchors the new agreement in your nervous system. Repeat the map whenever stress rises. Over weeks, the wound stops screaming because it finally feels heard. Next, we'll stack daily tools on top of this map, turning insight into routine healing. Insight is powerful. Routine is stronger. Here are 3 daily practices that lock Jung's map into your muscles, breath, and habits. 1. Somatic shakeout. 2 minutes. Stand. Loosen knees. Start shaking your hands. Then arms. Then shoulders. Small, quick tremors. Let the vibration climb through your body. Picture excess cortisol falling off like dust. Stop. Notice the quiet that follows. Your nervous system just reset without a substance. Second part's work letter. 5 minutes. Fold the page in half. Left column, let the wound speak. I'm scared. I need comfort. Right column, your conscious reply. I hear you. Let's breathe instead of drink. Dialogue for 3 exchanges. Writing slows the limbic surge and gives the pain a new language. 3. Compassion ritual. 30 seconds. Anytime. Carry a small stone or bead. When craving hits, place it on your chest. Inhale 4. Hold 2. Exhale 6. Whisper, I choose comfort and not chaos. This anchors safety to a physical object, rewiring the grab a drink reflex into grab the stone. Breathe. Stack these practices daily. They're short on purpose because consistency rewrites the brain faster than heroic once-a-month breakthroughs. Next, I'll share a real-life story and the neuroscience to prove this routine can turn pain into power. Meet Lena, 32, 10 years off and on the bottle. Therapy taught her why, but the craving still ambushed birthdays and breakups. She tried the shakeout, the parts work letter, the stone ritual, every day for 2 weeks. On day 9, a familiar trigger hit, Dad's angry voicemail. Her body tensed, throat, then gut. Hand to chest, stone. Breath in 4, hold 2, out 6. The urge dropped from hurricane to wind to calm. Why? Because repetition sparks neuroplasticity, new circuits that override the old dopamine track. Functional MRI studies show gray matter thickening in the prefrontal cortex after just 8 weeks of daily somatic practice. Lena still feels pain, but it's no longer the director. That's transformation. The wound stays real, yet you stay in charge. Your brain can do the same. Start small, shake, write, breathe. Watch the cycle lose its grip. Next, we'll invite you into that first small step. Close your eyes. Scan throat, chest, gut. Where did today's story land in you? Place a hand there. Breathe once. Slowly. Now ask yourself, what single moment first taught me to numb instead of feel? If an answer whispers, drop it in the comments. 1 line is enough. Your honesty could be the mirror someone else needs tonight. And keep that stone close. Because in stage 6, rebirth of meaning, we'll turn the space you just cleared into purpose strong enough to keep the wound closed. You survived the craving, but do you still wake up hollow? That quiet, echoing question. Now that I'm sober, what is my life for? Many call it the after-addiction void. Freedom without meaning. The brain is calm, yet the heart feels empty. Carl Jung warned that healing the wound is only half the journey. Without spiritual awakening, the shadow creeps back to fill the silence. In this video, you'll learn how to trade that emptiness for purpose. How awe resets the dopamine loop, how daily silence roots the soul, and why serving one person can anchor your own freedom. Stay with me, and let's turn survival into a life that finally feels worth living. The cravings are quieter now, but mornings still feel blank. You ask, what is my life purpose? And no answer echoes back. This emptiness is common after detox, yet it can become post-traumatic growth if you know where to look. Jung called it individuation, the stage where you rebuild identity on truth, not survival. Think of it as Carl Jung individuation for the modern world. Finding purpose after addiction. Start small, noticing one thing that stirs gratitude, awe, or curiosity. Each spark helps you create meaning in life instead of chasing it. That shift is the heart of spiritual awakening recovery, moving from, how do I stay sober, to, How to feel fulfilled. Healing isn't finished until you can turn pain into purpose, using your story to guide someone still lost. That's real healing after trauma, and it fuses recovery and spirituality into a single unstoppable force. Staying sober was step 1. Giving back in recovery is step 2. The wound you've stitched now becomes thread for others still torn. Research shows altruism and well-being rise together. The brain releases oxytocin when we lift another. Start small. Text someone struggling, offer to be their sober companion for the day. That simple act is service work addiction, turning what once hurt you into a tool for helping others heal. Join a peer support community or volunteer for mental health hotlines. Each hour spent is proof you can find purpose through service instead of substances. If you follow 12-step wisdom, this is making amends. But even outside that framework, lifting one soul lifts two. Soon, you'll guide someone as informal recovery sponsorship. And in that mirror, you'll see it. Survival has transformed into service, and meaning is no longer a theory. It's your daily practice. You've moved from pain to purpose. Now, you need anchors. Think of these as 3 unbreakable ropes that keep your meaning-centered life steady in any storm. Pillar 1. Self-compassion ritual. Every dawn, stand before a mirror, hand on heart. Speak one gentle sentence: I choose progress over perfection. This 30-second self-compassion ritual calms the inner critic and sets a tone of kindness. Pillar 2. Daily silence. 5 minutes of daily meditation practice. No apps, no guides, just breath. Start with simple morning breath work. In 4, hold 2, out 6. Over weeks, this mindful recovery routine quiets the limbic alarm that once triggered cravings. Add a 3-line gratitude practice habit right after. Something you saw, something you felt, someone you love. Gratitude boosts dopamine naturally, without sabotage. Pillar 3. Creative offering. Pain transmuted becomes art. Pick a creative healing exercise. Sketch, drum, write a haiku, 10 minutes daily. Log it in a journal for self-reflection, and mark an X on your purpose habit tracking calendar. This simple spiritual discipline proves to your brain that meaning is produced, not hunted. Wrap these pillars around each day, and recovery shifts from maintenance to momentum. Because a life fed by compassion, silence, and creativity rarely grows hungry for its old escape. Ever stand beneath a thunder-pink sunrise and feel small but safe? That rush is awe therapy in real life, a natural high feeling no substance can rival. Neuroscientists have mapped it. Moments of wonder trigger an oxytocin release that softens fear circuits and sparks a gentle dopamine reset. Consistent exposure builds neuroplasticity recovery, wiring new pathways that prefer beauty over binge. Think of awe as a spiritual experience the brain can measure. In studies on awe and addiction, just 5 minutes of skywatching or cathedral music reduced craving intensity by nearly 40%. Try a mindful awe practice. Step outside at dusk. Notice color gradients. Exhale slowly, naming one detail that stirs gratitude. Repeat daily. These micro moments act as brain rewiring techniques, teaching your nervous system that healing through nature is faster and richer than any chemical shortcut. Awe shrinks the ego, widens perspective, and reminds the wound it belongs to something vast and still unfolding. Meet Javier, 41, a recovered alcoholic testimony you won't forget. His recovery story started in a detox ward, but his true change began on a fog-lit cliff at sunrise. 6 months sober. He still felt empty. One dawn, he drove to the coast, desperate for anything beyond routine. Fog parted. Sun ignited the horizon. Waves thundered in gold. Tears, first in years, surfaced. That moment of awe became his spiritual awakening story. Each day after, Javier repeated the ritual. Sunrise, breath, gratitude. He added our 3 pillars: mirror compassion, 5-minute silence, 10-minute sketch. Within weeks, the morning view framed a post-traumatic growth story. Chest loosened, cravings dulled. He began finding purpose after addiction, volunteering as a peer support driver, sharing a real-life recovery talk at the shelter he once slept outside. A year later, he mentors others. Proof that life after addiction is a transformation journey, not a sentence. Javier's healing success story shows one thing: when you feed the wound meaning, it stops feeding on you. Ready to turn insight into muscle memory? Commit to this 7-day recovery challenge. No apps, no payment, just practice. Day 1. Sunrise meditation. Wake with the light. 3 minutes of stillness. Listen for birds, traffic, your own breath. This resets cortisol rhythm and begins your dopamine daily reset. Day 2. Mindful breathing routine. 4/2/6 count. 5 rounds before coffee. Feel the ribcage widen. Note any tight spots. Day 3. Daily gratitude exercise. Write 3 sentences. 1 sight, 1 feeling, 1 person. Read them aloud. Anchor positivity. Day 4. Creative expression therapy. Sketch, hum, journal a poem. 10 minutes. Creation rewires neural reward circuits, replacing old highs. Day 5. Service act checklist. Hold a door. Text encouragement. Buy a stranger coffee. Small altruism spikes oxytocin. Meaning expands outward. Day 6. Habit tracker for recovery. Print a calendar. Mark an X for every pillar you practice. Visual proof. Fuels momentum. Day 7. If you enjoyed the video plan, don't forget to review the week, subscribe, which exercise lit you up, hit the notification bell. Commit to that as a meaningful so you never miss an update. For the next 30 days, we'd love to hear your thoughts. 7 simple days, so feel free to drop a comment below and share your opinions. Isn't a miracle. We read every single one. Thanks for watching. The closing reflection that stitches this entire journey into forever purpose. Pause. Let the week settle. Feel the quiet space your old craving once filled. That emptiness isn't loss. It's new capacity for meaning. Look back. You mapped the wound, rewired the loop, served another soul. That's not just recovery. It's a spiritual awakening in motion. Now, widen the circle. Share 1 sentence of your new purpose in the comments. Your courage could spark someone else's start. Subscribe and ring the bell. This channel is your recovery community. We'll keep posting tools for meaningful living habits so the journey never stalls. Remember, freedom is a practice. Breathe, create, serve, and watch your life become the medicine you once searched for.